Arknights is a gacha game that has a lot of characters, or operators as the game and the community calls them. Arknights has literally hundreds of characters, so there's always going to be a character that someone is bound to like. We got priestesses, assassins, eldritch sea monsters, and we even have furries. But of course, this also means that there are going to be a lot of characters that people don't like, a few that one would call controversial. Now, if you're an Arknights fan, you probably heard that and thought, well, of course, most likely thought of characters like Passenger or Chen Alter. But if you're an Arknights veteran, there's probably one character that sticks out in the back of your mind, one that had such a huge discussion surrounding him, but now doesn't get talked about all that much anymore. One that was my first taste of Arknights controversy when I was a Doctor baby, one that was incredibly hated on, and one that was also incredibly loved. Hello, my foresty friends. I just gotta talk about what the frick was up with Flamebringer. Just as a quick note here, many of the things I'm gonna mention will mostly depend on my memory of the events happening, since I don't know if there's anyone else that has documented the reaction that Flamebringer got at the time, and most of the expression of the discussion was done as videos showcasing and reviewing Flamebringer that I don't want to show, with the exception of one big important video for the controversy. Out of respect for the people that made them, I don't want this video to seem like an attack to anyone that made videos or comments about this, so you can totally just take what I say with a grain of salt. This will be by no means a perfect recap of the controversy. Flamebringer had his first debut in Operational Intelligence, an event that ran from the 25th of March 2020 to the 8th of April. All you have to know about it was that it had stages where you could farm for a currency to unlock extra side stories and rewards. Flamebringer was also a welfare operator that was given out during the event, meaning he was given to the player for free as a reward without gacha. Flamebringer was a new guard at the time whose kit revolved around being tanky, and for stages that lasted long with streams of small enemies and big guys. We'll come back to this later, this ultimately became a huge reason why he was so hated on. Flamebringer's whole deal in the lore was that he's a Sarkaz, Arknight's version of a demon race of people, that has a connection with W and the Doctor, the player, before they or we got amnesia. It was set up in the extra stories of the event and also in a lot of Flamebringer's profile, which would make him a really big deal because W is a huge villain in the early chapters of Arknight's main story, and the Doctor's amnesia is like the player's whole backstory. Unfortunately, in the event explaining W's backstory, Dark Knight's memoir, and yes, that is the actual name, Flamebringer is never mentioned as far as I know. I haven't read the story in a long while, but I don't remember Flamebringer ever appearing in the story. So either he appears much later in W's life, or that whole thing was in retcon entirely, alongside with the whole knowing the Doctor before they or we got amnesia thing. I could talk about the whole thing for a while because it's the reason why I'm so fascinated by his character, but I might save that for a different video because this one isn't about Flamebringer as a character, it's about him as a controversy. I can't remember if the Flamebringer hate train started gradually or if it was instantaneous, but either way a lot of people did not like Flamebringer. The main reason was that it stemmed from his kit, as a lot of discussion and debates on operators tend to be about. Flamebringer is a 5-star operator, which means he has 2 skills and a talent. Skills in Arknights are an ability that are activated during the stage, and when an operator has more than 1 skill, you can choose which skill you want to bring to the stage. While a talent is a passive ability that you can't really choose, talents are usually much more unique for each operator and is an indicator of what that operator's kit is meant to be based around. Flamebringer's talent is Bloody Slaughter, which increases his max HP for every enemy he kills, and this can be stacked for around 30 times. His first skill is Blood Pact, which makes every 6 hit have an increase of power and heals him a bit. His second skill is Blade Demon, which activates after hitting a bunch of enemies 40 times, and he gets a permanent attack and attack speed boost. Obviously, his kit was made to be tanky and to deal with large groups of enemies. Unfortunately, the execution of it made so much of the community hate him. His skill activation is based on how many times he hit an enemy, while many other operators at the time had their skills activated by simply being on the stage, which meant that his skills took too long to activate, which means it takes too long for him to activate his boost, which means no big damage, which means die. His kit would have been fine mostly if he wasn't stuck with the most ill-fitting guard type. He's a Dreadnought guard, which means he only blocks one enemy and has the shorter range of the guard types. Basically, it's a class that can get overwhelmed very easily by huge crowds, and huge crowds is how Flamebringer activates his skill. And if 2 plus 2 equals 4, 4 is still very much less than 40. It's really niche and hard to use, which makes him an unpopular operator for general stages. Flamebringer's flaws were brought up in a video by a popular content creator, and let's just say a lot of people were paying attention to Flamebringer now at that point. He was absolutely trashed on. If Mans had a Twitter account, he'd be roasted in the QRTs. A lot of people were harsh to Flamebringer then because he was one of the first welfare operators to be given in the game. Not only that, but the first 5-star welfare operator. Of course, people were going to be disappointed when the 5-star turned out to be less useful than a 3-star that was already in the game. This was an era before Arknights decided to give free good 6-stars as welfare operators. Actually, now that I think about it, is the reason why Gladia and Lumen are good is because of the reaction that Flamebringer and operators at that point got. Like it's a response to the people that criticize him. That's a timeline that probably exists somewhere out there. Anyways, all fair criticism, right? A character sucked and people didn't like him and we all moved on, right? Well, not really. See, a lot of people call Flamebringer niche and useless, and while a lot of that criticism was valid, a lot of people also thought some of the criticism was unfair. I mentioned that Flamebringer was considered less useful than a 3-star, and that 3-star in question was Melantha. Cheap operator you could easily get from a gacha and had essentially the same class as Flamebringer. People compare Flamebringer to Melantha by saying that Melantha was cheaper in DP, a point that dictated when you could deploy an operator and thus easier to get on the battlefield. If you're not familiar with Arknight's mechanics, just think of DP as mana and deploying an operator as a spell that requires it. Some operators need a lot of mana to be deployed, and some need only a little. Melantha was also better for heli dropping, a tactic that involves dropping an operator in front of an enemy and killing them quickly before retreating the operator. There was a chunk of people that didn't agree with this. I know, a whole community of people didn't agree with everyone around them. A shocker. A lot of people considered this to be unfair because Melantha's and Flamebringer's kits are completely different. Melantha is a basic guard. She's essentially a tutorial character to teach the player what a Dreadnought guard is and how to use them. Flamebringer is more complex and thus isn't as simple as Melantha to use. Flamebringer is obviously meant to be tanky and to be on the battlefield for a long period of time. Melantha is not that. And also, Flamebringer isn't completely useless. There are stages that have long crowds of enemies that he could deal with, like various annihilation stages, and his tankiness is actually good for dealing with bosses by stalling. There are ways to combat his skill charging issue, like using Chen, for example. Not only that, but people just loved Flamebringer as a character, which I'll get into more detail about later, but people really liked the way he looked and other bits of his character profile. People really didn't like how they were told that the character they loved was trash no matter how objective the assessment was. If you're wondering why objective is in quotation marks, please watch this vid by Yi. He's like 10 times smarter than me when it comes to things like analyzing operators. So there's actually quite a lot to love about Flamebringer and also a lot to hate. Because of this dichotomy, there was a huge divide between people that hated Flamebringer and people that loved him. These two sides would essentially interact with each other incredibly passive-aggressively. The side that hated Flamebringer would say to accept that Flamebringer is a bad operator and that he's useless and had a lot of criticisms regarding the way he is and what that meant. And the side that loved him would respond back with, "No, you guys just don't understand him like I do." This manifested in a lot of showcase videos of Flamebringer being made. I will avoid showing real examples of this because, again, I don't want to make anyone feel bad. I think it's fine if you felt either way about Flamebringer as long as you didn't go to harass each other about it. However, if you were in the community at that time, y'all know that I'm not lying when I say that you could feel the tension. All for Flamebringer of all operators. People were getting into arguments over him, and his worst crime was being a trash operator. It's not like he had the same implications that Chan Alter had, where people saw her as a sign that the company behind Arknights was becoming less transparent or something. but he almost got the same volatile reaction that she got. And I think it was caused by a few things. One, the community was still pretty young at this time, and disagreements were just kinda hard to handle when a fandom is new. Flamebringer arrived in March of 2020. Arknights was out for less than a year, both in China and globally. We've never had anything like that happen at that point. Nowadays, Flamebringer would be considered a small thing. Like Flamebringer's biggest issue was that he was an operator that was niche and hard to use. Wowza, how unique. It's not like Arknights has released like 50 other operators like that. Some of them not even free like Flamebringer was. You had the gotcha for Ebenholz. Correct me if I'm wrong. Lord knows that I'm probably wrong about something here. But this was also one of the first instances of the waifu versus meta debate. Well, I guess in this version it's actually the husbando versus meta debate. But like, the debate basically centers around this idea of which is better, leveling up an operator because you like them or because they're really strong. Flamebringer didn't start this debate. Historians would probably credit Scotty for that, but he was the biggest example of the debate in action. If you're invested and you want to know more about this debate, you can watch Yi's video on the topic as well on other things that might be of interest to anyone who wants to start playing Arknights. Drails also made a video, but I can't find a link to it and I scrolled over his channel like 5 different times, so sorry about that, Drails. I think I might just be blind. Personally, my opinion on the debate is that every player should make an informed decision while also accepting the consequences that may follow for whatever decision you make. Personally, I do male knights, so I've accepted that sometimes my skill level isn't high enough to pass a certain stage of my current squad. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, I still feel fulfilled that I did a strategy that I made for myself. And also, I still have meta operators to beat stages with if I really wanted to. But some people don't want that. Some people actually want to beat the stages with powerful operators and do strategies that involve those operators. And that's fine. I think a lot of beginners tend to get overwhelmed very easily with Arknights, and I totally understand why. Arknights is one of those games where you gotta flail around a bit before you learn how to swim. So when it comes to the waifu versus meta debate, a lot of people think it's one or the other, when really it comes down to a balance of what matters to you, your needs, and what you want to accomplish with your account. Sorry, that was a bit sidetracked. Flamebringer just does that to me, I guess. The second thing that caused the Flamebringer discussion to blow up the way it did was... Listen, I get that Tectone is a really taboo subject in the AK community, but at some point we have to talk about the, well, not the elephant in the room, but the mess and indents that was made by the elephant when it used to be in the room. Don't worry, I'm just gonna talk about him as a factor in this one particular controversy rather than him as a whole. That's gonna require a whole other video that's anyone interested enough can try to do aside from me. But regardless, I mentioned Tectone because his video is currently the most popular video about Flamebringer and also was one of the earliest, especially when Arknights was rising as a community. His video also mentions a lot of talking points that became the driving force to the discussion surrounding Flamebringer. Things like how hard it is to charge your skill, how niche he is, and even mentions the whole husbando over meta thing that was a part of the central force of the split between Flamebringer haters and lovers. It was the start of it all. It was the start. The video was presented incredibly emotionally, from the provocative thumbnail and title, as well as the label of Giga Rant. It would evoke the viewer to feel like that this issue was something that the viewer should also be just as emotional about. I understand that this was not the intention of Tectone, but he was considered as a voice of reason in the Arknights community when he was still in it. The only guy that was brave enough to criticize Arknights because he cares about it so gosh darn much. I say this not to be critical of Tectone, but to give context as to why this video was so significant in the Flamebringer discussion. A lot of Arknights players respected and were even fans of Tectone during this time, so his opinions were often echoed in the community. And yes, inversely, the Flamebringer lovers team would be one of the first group of people to criticize Tectone too. I also feel like this was the start of many other small things that would lead to Tectone losing favor among the Arknights fans, but again, this isn't a video about Tectone, it's about Flamebringer. And just to remind everyone, this is my opinion. This is how I remember the controversy. This is based on my own memory. If you disagree with me, you can just tell me in the comments. So Flamingo was a huge subject of discussion because of his viability. Big deal. Again, we've had a bunch of other operators that have had their usability in the game put into question. Passenger comes to a lot of people's mind. The same split between passenger lovers and haters also happened when he was released, and he too became a meme for a while. But Flamebringer was still kinda different though, for two main reasons. The first one being that he didn't really get buffed in a way that would put him in the good graces of the community like Passenger did. Let me show you both of their modules, and to explain to the people that don't know what those are, modules are a thing that was added rather recently that would buff and elevate an operator's kits and stats further, and you get them by leveling up your operator and completing missions. Passenger gets two modules as a 6-star. One module and buff made him a lot stronger in terms of DPS, and the other reduces his SP charge, which means he can activate his skill faster. This is good because damage output and how long it took to activate his skill was considered a huge problem for Passenger. And before any of the opera analysts get upset, I'm oversimplifying Passenger's modules because this is a video about Flaminger, but if you want a better analysis, again, go to Yi, specifically at this timestamp. Flamebringer's module gives him a revive when he's killed, and an attack speed boost, which would be good, but his HP is slashed by 60%, which is a bit... because Flamebringer's whole thing is tankiness and having high amounts of HP and DPS, so this is considered pretty meh. To be honest with you, I'm not too well versed in Passenger's module because I'm stupid and also I haven't gotten them yet, so please check out these videos by Saotsu and Reiru as a comparison to how different Passenger's and Flamebringer's buffs were. Saotsu has 2 videos to cover each of Passenger's modules because he gets 2 modules. And the second difference is that Flamebringer is so incredibly popular in the Arknights fandom, even though arguably he's a less important character than Passenger is, and also inarguably gets lesser canon content made about him. Flamebringer has only appeared in 1 extra story in 1 early event, and he is incredibly beloved. It's partially because Flamebringer's character essentially panders to those people that ship their Arknight's Doctor OC / self-insert with the whole knowing the Doctor pre-amnesia thing. But also, he's a pretty lovable character. Now, granted, you can take this as me speaking as a Flamebringer fan, but aside from the W and Dr. Pre-Amnesia thing, he also mentioned and does things that give an insight to Sarkaz culture and history, one being a comment that he makes about Shining, another Sarkaz operator, and his, pause for trigger warning for suicide tendencies here, sorry, but suicidal tendencies that come in various forms, but a big one being his blatant disregard of his physical health by avoiding checkups for his fatal magical rot cancer that he's essentially in stage 4 of. There's also some smaller details, like his wrist having a barcode which looks the same as another character's barcode who was a slave in her past. He's also just incredibly edgy. I just read out his skill and talent names, but he also has this snarky and smartass attitude that's really commonplace for edgy anime boys. His token, a thing that you get when you receive a duplicate of a character, either from gacha or event rewards that is represented as an item that represents an aspect of an operator's personality, is a coat, and it reads, an old blood-stained coat that has burn marks. Can't tell whose blood it is. LMAO. You can actually see him wearing his favorite coat when you E2 him, which is incredibly endearing to me. And like many other edgy anime boys, he also has a soft side where he really likes taking care of flowers, though his reasoning for liking flowers is incredibly confusing. Something about representing life and death and whatever. I've been a huge Flamebringer fan for forever now. I still kinda don't get it. He's just kinda weird sometimes. I'm obviously more invested in Flamebringer as a character and his worldview rather than as a character I would ship my Dr. OC with, but that doesn't mean that Flamebringer didn't have other people you could ship him with to appeal to people like myself. W is an obvious one, but people also primarily shipped him with Executor. I know. You have many questions, and I can't answer them right now, because I'm thinking about making a separate video about these two, and also because I'd rather gargle sand. Just know that these two are one of the most popular ships, and canonically speaking, they literally don't know that the other exists. Their ship name is Flamex if you want to search out fan art of them. Here's their Chinese tag too, just to be sure. Do you want to know exactly how popular Flamebringer is? I found a concrete, legitimate, and totally flawless way to scientifically measure how popular Flamebringer is by using AO3. If you don't know what it is, it's a fanfiction site, and if you do know what it is, I know what you are. I think this is a good way to measure a character's popularity because can you imagine writing up a whole bunch of words for a character and publishing it to a crowd that may or may not care for your own enjoyment? I'll be measuring how popular Flamebringer is by searching up his name tag and comparing the amount of works that has been made and published to another Arknights character that is also loved. The first character I went to use was Chen, who is essentially Arknight's golden child with the amount of official works that feature her, and also the whole ass altar she gets to have. Writing down her name and clicking search shows that Chen has a respectable 267 works written and published with her name tag. Very nice. So now let's compare that to Flamebringer, who has 736? Okay, so maybe that was a bit unfair. Maybe fans of female operators don't write up as much fan fiction. Let's compare with Passenger instead, because we've already made the comparison before, and he got almost the same reaction as Flamebringer when he was first released, and he only has 181 works! What? Alright, that might not have been fair since Passenger hasn't been out as long as Flamebringer has, and I just mentioned that Flamebringer has a ship that's really popular with Executor even though they've never met each other canonically. Maybe I can compare the number of works with Thorns instead. He's a really popular character that's been put out for a long while now, and he too has a popular ship, and so he has 391. The only other operator that I found to beat Flamebringer's numbers is Silver Ash with 860. But that's because Silver Ash is frickin' Silver Ash! Silver Ash is the essence of an Arknight's husbando, and Flamebringer is catching up to him by around 150 works. That is insane! And I didn't even look at things like Flamebringer's fan art or even fanfiction on places like Lofter or Weibo or where the Arknights community is even more active. Flamebringer has a lot of diehard fans, and I find that so funny because it's most likely because people just like Flamebringer, but I have a feeling that's also partially out of spite. Like, the Flamebringer stands are so sick of people constantly calling him useless, so they just made a whole bunch of fan art and fanfiction to show that they loved him otherwise. I mean, to be honest, that's what I did, so I suppose it's just projection. Nowadays, I think people just love him because they love him and not because they're trying to prove something. Mainly because I think the Flamebringer hate has died down a lot now. We have other things to worry about, I guess. And it's not like Flamebringer is being completely ignored or neglected by Hypergriff or Yostar nowadays either. There was a cafe collaboration about a year ago with Ipstar in Chengdu that featured him alongside other characters. He even got a dessert named after him, which is really cute. He was also a featured character in Arknights' Ambient Synesthesia 2022 with a live 2D art that frickin' bangs, and I'm so sad that Quadrant Breaker didn't get turned into a skin line. But it's fine, Flamebringer still got his own summer skin for CN, and look at that, he's gorgeous. I like it, but also it kinda looks the exact same as his base outfit, but with a different coat and effects. It's fine, we were never getting that Quadrant Breaker outfit as a skin anyway, so it's the best we can get for now. Never forget what they've taken from you. Man, Flamebringer really is proof that pretty privilege exists, huh? Good for him, good for him. So that essentially wraps up Flamebringer's whole controversy. The video kind of fizzled out of talking about the community's reaction to just Flamebringer as a character. And that's just because it's kinda how the controversy fizzled out when it happened. There was a really volatile reaction until people gradually chilled out, and people now generally just accept Flamebringer as one of the more recognizable operators out there, for better or for worse. I find it pretty fascinating because we've never had a character with the same initial reaction and conclusion that Flamebringer got. Again, except for Passenger maybe? I think Flamebringer's controversy was truly a product of how young the community was at the time. If Flamebringer was released today, he'd probably just get the Ebenholz treatment and be labeled as the worst card ever and then ignored. But because of the budding community at the time, he got his reputation and fame today. And I kind of find that bittersweet in a way. Arknights has been around for almost half a decade, and the community has definitely changed from the earlier days, and it's interesting to me to see how our priorities have shifted for the game that we all love and stick with. Maybe if Flamebringer wasn't released then, it would have been another operator causing the controversy. There's an alternate timeline where this video was about Scotty instead, or something. If he was released today, I feel like he would still be called a really bad operator, but it just wouldn't have the same punch as it did back then. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm wrong about everything. I don't know. I don't know. But that's just me. I wanted to make a short video about this, so I think I'm gonna end it here. If you're still listening at this point, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this. If you're an Arknights fan, or you used to be, and you remember this controversy happening, I'd like to see a comment down below. Were you in team hating Flamebringer, or were you in team loving Flamebringer? Or did you just not care? What do you think of Flamebringer now? And if you weren't around, then which team do you think you would have fallen into? Do you think pineapple really deserves to be on pizza? I really want to know. Surely other people remember this fever dream. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, like, subscribe, do all the things YouTubers ask you to do. I have socials where I put my art and commissions, yada yada yada. Stay safe, my foresty friends. Bye bye!